Hi, it's Dr. Brian McDonough, and welcome to the Dr. Brian McDonough Show. At the time of this recording, it's almost been a year since Jim Gardner had his final broadcast on Channel 6 ABC Action News. He talked about various things with me on the Dr. Brian McDonough Show related to his career, things like his most important story, his most important role. But he also talked with me about the future of the media, the future of news. And what he had to say is quite interesting to say the least. By the way, if you want to see that last broadcast, all you have to do is go to 6abc.com. They actually have it up there. It certainly is worth seeing, especially if you're not from the Philadelphia area. You may not be familiar with Jim Gardner's work.
No, I never certainly anticipated my good fortune for such a long period of time at WPVI Channel 6. When I came to Philadelphia, I came as an eager reporter, and I was looking forward to an opportunity to learn and to be part of what at the time, was an exciting and upwardly mobile team, and the notion of anchoring the 6 and 11 o'clock news for 45 years was the farthest thing from my mind. I have a lot of faith in the public's thirst for information, um, whether it be information having to do with what's going on in the world, what's going on in their country, or what's going on in their community, what's going on in their backyard. And I think wherever there is a technology, Brian, there will always be content that has to do with people's thirst for knowing what's going on in, when I say their community, someone once described to me that news is a series of concentric circles. The smallest one being people's own community, whether it be their village, their township, their city, and then as the circles get larger, we're talking about their state, their region, and then their country, and then the world. So, local news's primary responsibility is that smallest concentric circle. But of course, everything is so interconnected today, and obviously what's going on in the country and the world is so important that that broadcast entities, which are by contract with the government responsible for their area of responsibility, their area of license, meaning local news, we are more expansive than that. I think both you and I have lived through um, the uh, the growth cycle for cable TV. It's now going in the other direction. Cable is losing about 7% of its viewership per year. We've all heard the term cord cutters. That's what's happening now. So we're now looking at a time after cable. So the issue really is what comes next, and will there be a place for news and local news and what we consider to be news uh, in the new technology, and what is coming next is the world of streaming and the world of social media, the world of direct to consumer. I think that's one of the ways that the people who employ us refer to this new technology, is that local television stations and networks are now going where the younger people are. And the younger people aren't, and obviously many of them are, but to make a generalization, many, if not most of younger people are not watching news on television the way we're used to seeing it watched. You want to watch the network news at 6:30, you turn on the television at 6:30, you turn on David Muir or Lester Holt or whoever it is that you prefer to watch. You want to watch the local news at 6 o'clock or at 5 or at 4 or in the mornings. You turn on the television at a particular time to watch your favorite newscast. That is called appointment viewing. We know when something is going to be on, and that's when we go to the set to turn it on. Um, Cable news began to change those habits. Anytime you want to see Well, at one point in time, it was all pretty neutral television news. You could watch CNN or Fox or MSNBC, for instance. Now, um, and I'm rambling, and I apologize, but those networks now seem to be part of a larger echo chamber that people who are watching news the way they want to hear it are picking specific networks, cable networks, where they think they're going to hear and see news that reflects their point of view. We all know about that. But the next frontier is this thing we call digital, this thing we call streaming. And I'm very confident that there will always be a place for local news. People will always want to know what's going on in their communities. People will always want to know what their weather forecasts are. People will always want to know what their ball teams are doing. So local news will always have its place. The question is, how will we watch it? Will we watch traditional newscasts the way we do today? Although I am probably being accurate by saying fewer of us are doing that today compared to what it was 10, 15, 20 years ago because of all the choices that viewers have now at any time of the day. So what will local news be like? What form will it take? How will we watch it 10, 15 years from now, 5 years from now? After this long, rambling monologue, the answer is I don't know. It'll be in your pocket, it'll be on your tablet, it'll be on your computer, and it will be on a television set on the wall if you want to use that vehicle. But will there be newscasts that you tune into at a certain time of day every day? Or will you simply punch up 6ABC, channel 10 or whatever it's called to see what there is on demand at that time, and you can get the news whenever you want, however you want? I think we're moving in that direction.
What was the toughest story you ever had to do? Either on a personal level, professional level, what was the toughest?
Well, I mean, emotionally, it might have been the death of Jim O'Brien. I was having breakfast at Famous Delicatessen, which is where I usually ate breakfast on Sunday morning. And there were no cell phones then. And I got a call from our assignment manager, whose name was Kenny Plotnick, who went on to become the news director at WABC in New York and in many other places. But he knew where I was, or he had a pretty good guess as to where I was. And he called the delicatessen, and it was unusual for me to get a phone call on a Sunday morning.
Mm.
And I picked up the phone, and he said, Jim, sit down. And I said, Ken, I'm sitting down. He said, Jim O'Brien is dead.
Wow. Wow.
You
Yeah.
know, how many times in your life, are you going to be hit with that kind of an experience, that kind of news? I mean, Jim was a friend, he was a colleague, and as much as anything else, he was a partner. And that moment was indescribable. But everybody who had anything to do with Channel 6 just went to the station. Even people who weren't working, everybody just wanted to. It was a
Mhm.
reflex. You go to the station, and of course, those of us who had prominent roles, had a lot of work to do that day and had to fight off the emotion to remember that we were professionals and we had a job to do. And this was as big a story in many respects as we had ever done to that point. I guess what I'm saying is someone who wants to go into this industry would be well to have a great deal of curiosity, um, endless curiosity, someone who uh, loves to read, loves to acquire information, someone who loves to write, someone who wants to become a very good writer, someone who um, understands, if you're talking about local news, that people are just as interested. If you live in Norristown, you want to know what's going on in Norristown. If you live in Royersford, you want to know what's going on in your school board, and in your township council. Just because you're not talking about Russia and Ukraine doesn't mean that it's not very important, because it is. People, in some respects, people want to know more about what's happening, with their local taxes and with their school boards and with their utility services and with their law enforcement agencies than they want to know about the great issues of the world. Interestingly, to me, the story where I have felt like I was needed most and could provide the most important service over that period of time has been the last 2 years, and with the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
Um, uh, I, every day that we go on the air, I have felt, since February, March of 2020, that we were giving people just essential information. And certainly for the first half of this time frame, and we forget, people were scared. People were worried. People were worried about their own well-being. People were worried about their families, and plenty of people lost members of their families. So if you hadn't lost a member of your family, you were worried about losing a member of your family. And there was this sense of isolation. And what about the kids and their education? It's been unlike any story that I've certainly experienced before. And then, of course, it became politicized. Then the politics, became so much a part of this story. I mean, people say, well, what about 9/11? Obviously, 9/11 was, a transformational event for this country, for the way we see our country, the way we see other parts of the world. But it was very different. This story, every day for 2 years, has had an immediate, substantive, emotional, psychological, economic impact on all of our lives. Um, at no time have I ever felt that, my job was more important and where I could provide a more important service than we have. And when I say I mean we.
Oh,
I said I hope COVID retires before I do.
yeah, and I
Uh,
thought that's the essence of Jim Gardner. You basically you understood all those things.
yeah, objectivity is a funny thing, Brian. It's we do bring to our work the sum of not only of our experiences, but well, of our life experiences. Do you remember the name Fred Friendly?
Yes, I do. Yes.
Fred Friendly was the president of CBS News and was Edward R. Murrow's producer during the very formative stages of television news. And he taught a class at the journalism school where I went to college, and it was a class that undergraduates could take. And so I must say it was a bit of a gut. So a lot of us did take it. It was one of those easy A's, you know what I mean? But 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 he said something that I thought was it really made an impact on me then, and it's made an impact on me since. He said objectivity is a worthy goal, but explain to me, and I'm paraphrasing, but this was what he tried to communicate. Explain to me how a reporter who is, let's say, white, let's say, came from a privileged background, went to a fancy schmancy college, um, and uh, and he goes to the scene of a story, um, and an African American who um, has not had a privileged background, who has dealt with uh, the stink of racism throughout various times in his life, if not for his entire life. Worked his way through college, and just had to show an enormous amount of resilience and courage to get through college. These two individuals have had two dramatically different life experiences. Now they have arrived on the scene of the same story. They're viewing this story, they're writing about this story. And are you going to tell me that their perspective and their interpretation of what they have just seen is going to be exactly the same? Unlikely.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can certainly understand how it might not be.
Sure.
So I guess the point that Friendly was trying to make was that objectivity is, might not be achievable under many circumstances. What can be achieved, according to him, was being fair. Everybody has a responsibility and an obligation to be fair when they are being a journalist. Fairness, um, intellectual integrity, journalistic integrity, these are obligations. And that made an impact on me when I was 20 years old. I didn't know I was going to go into journalism at the time. But lo and behold, I did. And I tried to keep that with me, as my guidepost for all these years. And hopefully I've managed to, be successful with that.
Well, I can't say I've seen every broadcast, but I've seen enough of them, Jim. And just to complete our conversation, I always have viewed you as fair.
Well, coming from you, that means a great deal, Brian. I appreciate that.